Welcome to the School of Love, the place where miracles are normal. Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the School of Love, the place where we learn practical tools based on scientific research and our own experiences towards improving ourselves, living life to its fullest, and contributing to the best of our abilities to the world around us. I'm Dr. Maria Grajdian, and I am a professor of media studies and anthropology at Hiroshima University. In my free time, I am doing my best to guide you in building up a life of contentment, joy, and fulfillment while applying lessons learned in school to overcome the difficulties, challenges, and insecurities of the real world. In today's video, I talk about the animation movie Zootopia, produced, released, and distributed by Walt Disney Pictures in 2016. This video critically observes the contents and the audience's perception of Zootopia on the background of its Japanese theatrical release, and hermeneutically analyzes its impact both on the local mass media and on the cinema visitors, in terms of their understanding of self and other, as well as in reference to visions for the future. In the year 2016, two animation works produced outside of Japan, Zootopia and Angry Birds, also known as Angry Birds the movie, were released on the Japanese market, already oversaturated with domestic entertainment productions, animated and live action. What these two animation movies had in common, what made them stick out from among numerous similar productions, were two very different, one might even say opposite visions on community life and how this community life could interact with newcomers. As described later on in great detail, while a strategy involving social cultural detachment and economic political isolationism seems more appealing, the historical philosophy of expansion and diversification appears more in alignment with global irreversible trends. And now, first things first, that is, two disclaimers. The first disclaimer serves to strongly emphasize the fact that this YouTube channel, The School of Love, is not part of my educational and research activities at Hiroshima University. It is nonetheless part of my privilege, joy, and sense of duty to propagate and implement knowledge, information, as well as motivation and inspiration outside the limited framework of academic endeavors. Together, we can build up a better tomorrow for as many of us as possible. The second disclaimer relates to the fact that I am a trained musician and musicologist, not a psychologist, therapist, or counselor. The idea I am sharing in my videos reflect my deep-going preoccupation with life, my own life and other people's lives, and express the results of my experiences, research, and for better or for worse, my failures, as well as my recovery from those failures, recovery which is still ongoing. The ideas expressed in the videos on this channel, The School of Love, cannot and may not and must not replace the consultation with specialists in whichever areas of your life you might have questions or you might struggle with. If you are new to the channel, at this moment I would like to please consider subscribing, sharing, liking, and commenting. Thank you very, very much. This helps us not only with that mysterious algorithm which seems to dominate the YouTube galaxy, but also with contributing to the expansion of the community of humans doing their best to impact positively the world and those around them by discovering their authentic selves and living life wholeheartedly. Thanks again. The year 2016 saw the release of two animation works produced outside of Japan, which seemed to challenge the status quo on the volatile and highly competitive Japanese market. Zootopia, the story of an utopian universe in which mammals, both prey and predators, coexist in peace and harmony, and Angry Birds, telling about the brutal intrusion of pigs into the highly tranquil village of a secluded island with flightless birds as inhabitants sharing a happy, undisturbed life. Both Zootopia and Angry Birds came on the background of the lurking xenophobia and isolationist policies in wealthy countries, with leading politicians increasingly under pressure by frightened citizens to reinforce measures to stop the wave of newcomers flooding from poorer areas of the planet towards the affluent Northwest. This video draws on empirical observations of the Japanese movie market, as well as on theoretical analysis of the visual material, and searches for answers to the questions regarding the validity of the two options: the dream of peaceful coexistence or the vision of an isolated community thriving in itself, from the perspective of the current historical stage. In doing so, I proceed in two steps. Firstly, Zootopia is described under the microscopical vision of the concept unity within diversity and the hidden challenges as well as promises included in it. As Judy Hopps, the main character, explains at some point, faith and courage are necessary to overcome old paradigms of behavior. But is it really that simple? In the second part, I critically observe the animation work on the background of the Japanese situation in an attempt to see both the positive and the negative aspects of its approach. As to be shown in the course of the phenomenological analysis, there is no absolute way to advance through history and to search for meaning as a nation and as an individual. What seems to be the solution in one era mostly proves wrong in another one. Much more important are a flexible attitude and a core set of beliefs and values which can guide both nations and individuals throughout the waves of self-definition and internationalization. The mass media landscape of recent years has been suffering a recurrent backlash, which hardly allows for creativity and freedom of expression in a world more concerned with public image than with artistic excellence. More than any media, the animated medium seems to move swiftly along the interdictions and restrictions imposed by political correctness and to find that aesthetic ideological space which allows for messages to penetrate the walls of superficiality. For the past 15 to 20 years, I have been inadvertently pursuing a form of so-called applied anthropology, as promoted, among many others, by Anne Ellison and Christine Kondo, and more recently by Simon Sinek. It is a combination between everyday lifestyle and research, in which the investigator, in this case myself, serves as the main subject of his or her own research endeavor, while keenly observing its counterpart, in this case Japanese audiences and their relation with the social cultural environment. The major difference to the classical participatory observation is the fact that in participatory observation, the observed phenomena used to occur generally in groups of humans belonging to a different cultural circle or geographical sphere than the researcher, and took place without a prior theoretical formulation of the expected results and impact on further areas. In case of applied anthropology, the point of departure serves as a clear orientation entity and incorporates considerable amounts of prior preparation, both theoretical and methodological, so that the result, while not being entirely predictable, is to a certain extent estimated in terms of its relevance for larger segments of the human life and activity. Methodologically, participatory observation and hermeneutical interpretation are the two pillars of the analysis, which validate the phenomenological experience and give strength to the resulting statements. Parallel to this phenomenological approach, I have been pursuing what might be described as an empirical study, which refers to informal discussions with consumers of animation works about what interests and moves them, and a close observation of their reactions to my questions and explanations. As it turned out, introducing Zootopia and Angry Birds as the two animation movies released in 2016 by non-Japanese producers with their exquisite graphic design and its plain retelling of history, employing simple characters with whom viewers can easily identify, held much greater potential to make comprehensible the intrinsically complicated dynamics of the Japanese geopolitics of generating financial gains via its entertainment media under half-hearted governmental surveillance, usually known under the more generous label of cultural imperialism, while promoting soft power as a new means to climb the ladder of international recognition, then explaining elaborate theories of cultural analysis. I became genuinely curious as to why this was happening. Parallel with this fieldwork, consisting of applied anthropology involving participatory observation characterized by phenomenological experience and the empirical collection of data, I have intensively researched recent work in anthropology and post-colonial studies, cultural studies and media studies, which led me into the less chartered territory of anthropology of media and how humans interact with media on a daily basis, and pushing notions of identity, plurality of options, and individual freedom at the center of my research endeavor. On a deeper level, the research meant starting to think on how people give in unconditionally to the overwhelming temptations and delusions of instant gratification created by mainstream media, or, in less common cases, on how they resist the almighty media and its infiltration of all domains of life. Unlike in the case of Japanese animation, the academic literature on Western animation has been mainly focused on the contents and their relevance in a socio-economic perspective in their countries of origin. The current video locates Zootopia in the landscape of Japanese media and its clash against a very strong domestic view on the function of the entertainment industry and cultural consumption. At this point, it is still premature to release a general forecast regarding the direction of new media in the next decade. But as for classical media, of which cinema is an important segment, the thin line between bringing comfort and challenging ingrained thinking patterns will continue to be a powerful delimitation element. Furthermore, as the Japanese experience shows, the increasing production of low-level movies with pure entertaining purposes loses its appeal under international pressure, where competitiveness and viewers' appreciation are gradually becoming decisive factors in the success of a mediatic work. As to be shown in greater detail later on, between the colorful utopia of a perfect coexistence in accordance with the principle unity within diversity, as displayed in Zootopia, and the bleak vision of a closeted community with little room for individual peculiarities and freedom, as depicted in Angry Birds, there is a huge range of existential nuances to be taken into consideration. The Japanese experience shows that the walk on extremes is not only dangerous but also self-destructive and implies a very high toll on the dynamics of the society in which this occurs. Perhaps is a balancing act on the middle way a more suitable option, with respect for those who are different in their own fashion and with gentle acceptance towards those for whom perfectly fitting in, if that is ever possible, represents the viable life attitude. Thus, the principle all for one and one for all, but only among ourselves, from Angry Birds, as enticing as it might seem at first glance, loses its brightness and opens the gate for a warmer, softer encounter with the others. The two contrasting principles displayed by Zootopia and Angry Birds, unity within diversity and all for one and one for all, but only among ourselves, are symptomatic for the tense polarities defining current times. In openly addressing the advantages and disadvantages of each option, as well as courageously disclosing the infinite spectrum of nuances between these extremities, the producing teams of these two animation works provide deep insights into the workings of late modernity, its challenges, its fears, and its sometimes unexpected solutions. Directed by Byron Howard and Rich Moore, Zootopia is an animation movie released in 2016 by Walt Disney Pictures. After being premiered at the Brussels Animation Film Festival in Belgium on February 13, 2016, and having gone into general theatrical release in various formats in the United States on March 4th the same year. In Japan, Zootopia registered an unusual success from the perspective of its over-competitive domestic entertainment market, being the third country in terms of box office earnings after United States and China, with roughly $70 million, which is partially to be drawn back to it being released during holidays, but also due to its unusual story. The unlikely partnership between a rabbit police officer and a red fox con artist, as they uncover a conspiracy involving the disappearance of savage predator inhabitants of the mammalian metropolis. Accordingly, the plot is quite simple. In a world populated by anthropomorphic mammals, rabbit Judy Hopps from rural Bunnyborough fulfills her childhood dream of becoming a police officer in urban Zootopia. Despite being the Academy valedictorian, Judy is delegated to parking duty by Chief Bogo, who doubts her potential because she is a rabbit. On her first day, she is hustled by the con artist fox duo composed by Nick Wilde and Finnick. As the story unfolds, Judy becomes entangled in an increasingly complex conspiracy involving 14 missing predators, with the climactic resolution which divides the otherwise peaceful and tolerant metropolis of Zootopia between preys, which are 95% of its population, and predators, which apparently can return very easily to their instinctual way of hunting and killing the weaker mammals. Sad over the outcome of her efforts, Judy returns home to Bennyborough, but shortly afterwards, she discovers the truth beyond the real background of the conspiracy and returns to restore the peace and harmony in the no-town city of Zootopia. With the help of Nick, who has estranged himself from her as a consequence of Judy's previous moves, but who decides to join her in her efforts, she manages to uncover the truth with proofs and therefore to bring back the atmosphere of trust and cooperation between mammals of various categories, who can now continue to coexist happily in the same city. To make it for a beautiful ending, Nick graduates from the Zootopia Police Academy as the city's first Fox police officer and becomes Judy's partner. The reasons for Zootopia's success worldwide are manifold, and some of them are particularly powerful in the Japanese market. Firstly, the plot addressing the issue of prejudice and of lack of transparency, as well as the damage brought upon innocent victims by xenophobic views of education, is a big topic in times of increasing waves of hatred and political isolationism. Nick's trauma and his consequent decision to simply be whatever the others might think of him, that is, a fox is sneaky and untrustworthy, is a common phenomenon known as labeling, in which one's own identity is modeled upon the expectations and reinforcements of the environment and prevailing stereotypes, hence suffocating the individual's personal aspirations and abilities, which remain unknown unless miraculously discovered by a happy turn of the events. The concept of unity within diversity is fundamental in creating the societies of the future, with the focus slowly changing from the racially, religiously, or even familially centered educational models towards those based on individual fulfillment and recognition. Directly related to this problematic, the second element which singles out Zootopia is the movie's lead character, Judy Hopps, an energetic, hardworking young lady rabbit. She is a welcome change for Disney animated feature movie heroines, such as the classical Disney princess franchises. Unlike other Disney female characters focused on romance or family loyalty, Judy's focus is on her dream career as a police officer and serving her city. It is an unusual ideal rising from the faith in a world in which all inhabitants can live in harmony and understanding, transcending racial differences, which seem in Zootopia's world to be at the foundation of everything else beyond religious or gender-related differences. One important factor in making Judy a symbolic representation of future femininity is her ability to accept mistakes and to reconsider former conclusions. In a world which requires perfection and absolute self-confidence with no space for individual regressions or mistakes, Judy's fallibility is what makes her more than human and brings her more closely to audiences who, thus, gain the insight into the necessity of repeated attempts and unavoidable failures on the way to personal excellence. A third element related to Zootopia's appeal to audiences worldwide is Nick's character. Obviously a victim of segregation and social isolation, Nick appears and evolves at the center of this delightfully well-orchestrated parable about trust and tolerance versus panic and prejudice. While originally he seems anything but a cynical downbeat con artist, keen on playing his own game in the larger feature of life, eventually his actions openly turn into an encouragingly upbeat celebration of love and diversity in times of hatred and uncertainty. Furthermore, the interaction between him and Judy overcomes the usual story of boy meets girl. Their encounter is one of deceit, counterpointed by compassion, and unveiled in the course of the story as such. However, in parallel with Judy's development from a naive country girl into a mature citizen, Nick follows a similar pathway from leaving behind the past in the shadows of normality towards a life in the service of the community to which he belongs, and by which he is at last accepted as an equal member. In the Japanese context, the open joy of this animated celebration of the unity within diversity ideal came as a fresh wind on the background of increasing isolationist policies of protecting the country from outsiders. Moreover, the dynamic vitality of Zootopia's main characters, as well as their vivid interaction, brought an important argument within the media reinforced debate of the gender differences and the ability to cooperate between men and women in late modern Japan. The argument refers mainly to the fact that more than the social cultural environment in which humans are born, one's own ability to follow one's own dreams and ideals are the foundation on which the individual identity is constructed. This is a very progressive view on the individual's role played within the society, proposing a world in which conformism to the group regulations and expectations have been considered paramount for the well-being of the entire nation. The current video has critically observed one of the two extreme tendencies visible in the world at the present, as reflected in one popular animation movie released internationally in the year 2016. On the one hand, there is the "we're all one big global family" way of thinking, encompassed by the unity within diversity principle, which deletes differences and boundaries, so necessary for individual fulfillment and a strong sense of self, the type described in Zootopia. On the other hand, there is the all for one and one for all, but only among themselves tendency, strongly moving against the all-encompassing globalizing wave, as portrayed in Angry Birds. In Zootopia, there is the unity within diversity principle, seemingly moving more in unison with universal cries for unification and emancipation. In Zootopia, the social cultural ideal of expansion through diversification in accordance with generally accepted human rights as applying to all living inhabitants of this planet seems like a workable plan and blatantly ignores such practical questions of different culture, including religious and ethnic, educational, and even technological backgrounds. More notably, while the city of Zootopia appears indeed as offering fair chances to all those who are willing to try their luck, the ideological background is clearly a Western one, centering on equality and progress, on individual determination and strength, and on an ineffable feeling of if you want it, you can do it. Furthermore, questions of hierarchy and awareness of one's position, as represented by Julie's confrontation with Chief Bogo, or her simply leaving her assigned parking post to follow a different issue, within the system are left aside, facilitating the impression that disrespecting the law and the prevailing rules, written or not, is allowed in case of exceptional individuals. This is the fallacy of excessive self-confidence, in which case the paradigm of exceptional until proven otherwise might more often than not prove wrong. The major point with the unity within diversity principle is that it cannot function, realistically speaking, without a preset system of laws and regulations, which stem always from a specific worldview within a particular geographic, historical, developmental framework. However, it is exactly this preset system of laws and regulations which preemptively excludes newcomers from a different framework, who could provide fresh inputs if allowed to do so. And how is there supposed to be differentiated between the good newcomers and the bad newcomers if not based on the same system which actually excludes them precautionarily in the name of itself? This dilemma runs deep until the very core of what we are as individuals and as a community composed of those very individuals, and it is not an easily solvable dilemma. When talking to Japanese viewers of the two animation works, Zootopia and Angry Birds, what struck me the most was that there was no person who would have appreciated both movies. The viewers were clearly divided into two groups, which faithfully corresponded to the main political affiliations in Japan. The conservative ones, who plead for a preservation of Japan and the Japanese people outside of the world's adventures, in the name of a glorious past, own powerful traditions, and ethnic homogeneity. And the progressive ones, who are open to international influences and fresh inputs coming from abroad, especially in terms of technical skills. What is important to note, though, is that the members of the second category, the so-called progressives, do not believe or feel so out of an innate rush of tolerance or ideological awakening, but out of sheer pragmatism, as a result of watching the news distinctly on non-Japanese channels and comprehending that Japan's isolationism must change for a sustainable future as an autonomous nation state. Moreover, there was some amount of frustration expressed by most members of both categories due to the fact that Japan, or better said, Japan's economic political elite, whom the general population had trusted blindly until the economic collapse at the beginning of the 1990s, had not been able to either avoid, by means of technological development, being practically forced to join the global scene and to do it, if it did choose to do so, on its own terms, or to play a more significant role in the historical events which have been leading up to the current world power structure, so that it possesses a stronger voice in the choir of global leaders. Either way, the fact that Japan has no other choice than to follow the general trend and to open itself up so that it becomes part of the whole conglomerate seems rather frustrating than fulfilling. I believe that regardless of domestic discourses and popular representations of natural homogeneity, uniqueness, and glorious past, deeply engraved in overhauled slogans, Japan Inc. must learn to see the world outside of its, imaginary or not, borders in a similar way as most of the people on this planet see it. A common space full of splendor and beauty, full of potential adventures and discoveries. The rest depends on what we choose to do out of it. So that would be from me for today. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you very much for joining me today. And I'm looking forward to welcoming you very soon again. Love and peace to you all.